And then I will hand it over to Geneva.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, so we're just gonna go into our second session. First session was all kind of just all about perspective and that beginning portion of becoming peer ready, and we're gonna go into planning, which is our next section. Um, just a reminder about adding the colors to your names in Zoom uh, can help us if uh, we're calling on people, just to make sure that we're calling on people that are okay with it and are available to speak at the time. Um, and then we're going to kind of go into some reflections on perspective. So I'll give it back to Darda.
Excellent. I'm just going to add my color here before I get started. There we go. Excellent. All right. So first of all, I just want to say how impressed both Geneva and I were when we were looking at the take-home assignments and that were submitted. Really felt like there was a lot of thought put into them, and a lot of good effort. So super impressed with that. I wanted to start because we don't just want to give you these and then walk away and never touch on them again. So we have some questions that we're going to go through for those that have submitted, or maybe there's some who did it but weren't able to submit it because we did get an email about that. So no big deal. But do you have any questions that came up for you when you were looking at the take-home assignment? No? All right. That means it was very clear and people kind of understood what was going on and were able to work through it. That's great. Um, I'm actually going to jump to question 3. Um, is there something that came up for you when you were looking through the questions or when you were doing the take-home assignment? Was there anything that came up for you that was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that before, or that's really interesting? Whether it's applied specifically to the area of um, paraswimming or not, doesn't matter. It could be, oh, I could use that in my other coaching or anything like that. Just wondering if anything came up for anyone that they'd like to share.
I'll just jump in. I already shared this last week, so it was in the homework a little bit as well, which was that we thought we were inclusive and we used the language of inclusivity, but we weren't. So some of this, the homework that we did that was related to policy and the things that you put on your website around the wording about who's swimming in your club and who it's open to was enlightening last week. It was still enlightening in the homework.
No, that's great. And I do have to say that the inclusion statements that people did submit, like I really appreciated the level of thought that went into those. So I hope that my hope is that you will now take those inclusion statements if and implement them however that process works in your club. If you have to take that to your board and present it to them, and kind of start that process for how to make that a formal part of your club's policies, and the website is also a great place for those statements to live as well. All right. Well, I'm not going to hammer too much more on that. I do want to say, though, that again, one last time, just how impressed I was with the thought that went into all parts of that take home assignment. So I really hope that you found it enlightening for your own learning as a coach, and that you were able to take something, hopefully, especially that inclusion commitment statement, away from the assignment. So thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're gonna jump right into planning then, because we've got 5 sections to go through, and we'll start with that. So starting with place, uh, that's largely considering your environments, so things like facilities, parking, and accommodations. Um, Within that, things to think about are how are participants actually getting to your facility? If it's public transit, if they're driving, if they're getting dropped off, all of those pieces. Is the facility itself accessible? If there's stairs, are there either ramps or an elevator? Those kind of pieces. Um, and then with that is the main entrance to your facility accessible? Um, with a lot of older buildings, there's main entrances that have stairs and then like an accessible entrance like off the side or to the back, like kind of awkward and it's really hard to find. Do doors have push buttons or are they motion activated to make it easier to actually enter and leave? Are washrooms accessible? And then if signage is available in different options, so that could be large print, braille, in French as well as English, using images if they're clear and relevant, those sort of things.
Sorry,
within-
Geneva, can you just go back one quick second? Are you able to show them that accessibility checklist for
I
that
can
link?
try.
I just think it's you know, we hear these words about what is accessibility and what to look for stuff, and it can be a bit overwhelming if you're not using accessibility features yourself. It is very easy to not have a great understanding of what the features are that can make it more accessible for other people. Like if you don't use it, you don't see it. I totally get that. I have a whole story about that myself. So here is a checklist that the Rick Hansen Foundation has put together of different things that people can kind of look for at their facilities to kind of identify the areas that are or maybe are not accessible. Lori has a hand raised.
Yeah, hi. I'm in the town of Perth and we have a pool that's 45 years old. And about 10 years ago, we tried to we put in an accessible change room. So we took half of the men's change room and made it into an accessible change room. But there are still issues with it because in that change room, the showers are accessible, but there's no washrooms in that area. They have to walk out of that change room into the hallway where it's cooler. It's not far from the doors. And so the washroom is accessible, but they have to move from change room to the washroom in the hallway. And then even we don't have a ramp that goes up from the change room. They have to come out into the cooler hallway and go up the ramp to the pool deck. So with the older buildings, it is hard to get, all the accessibility that you want. So like you were saying earlier about, we are inclusive, but I think there's still sometimes are things that are lacking. So it's hard to really accommodate, not accommodate, but make it easy, I think, for everybody. You may be able to accommodate them, but it's not ideal, I guess.
Yeah, no, you make some really good points there. And, part of it isn't necessarily always that we can change everything. Like we recognize, and it's realistic that there are older buildings and there are constraints within those older buildings. What is sometimes just as helpful for people is if you're able to point out the parts that maybe aren't accessible or what those little tricky things, like you just mentioned, there is an accessible washroom, but it's not directly attached. If people can be made aware of those things before they show up, then they can prepare themselves. They can bring extra towels, let's say, they can bring a robe, like those types of things just help people be prepared for the environment that they're going into. Geneva, correct me if you have other stories or experiences, but in my experiences, people are accepting that things might not be perfect for them and for their exact accessibility needs, but if they can be made aware ahead of time and they can make plans around that, they will still come. Maybe they just know they have to have a support person help them to get around or those different things. So if you can go through kind of like a checklist like this, and even identify, just like you said, we've tried, and here's where it's great, and here's where it's not so great, and just identify that for people. That can be really helpful as well. Sorry, Geneva, not to hijack that point. I just really thought it was important to point out that these resources are available. The Rick Hansen Foundation is very focused on disability awareness, and they have this resource, and I know they have some other resources as well around accessibility. So it can be a good website to go and take a look at. So you'll get these slides, so you'll have this link, but we can also include a link just to like the Rick Hansen website, and people can take a look through there as well. I'll make a note to do that. Sorry, Geneva.
No, that's great. Yes, it's a good idea to actually highlight the resources that we've listed. So good. Okay. And then kind of like looking towards those points of like what can you actually control? With place, there's a lot of things that are outside of control, whether it's a 45-year-old building, things that do get changed often have financial constraints. And so, like Darda said about like that advocacy piece about you can advocate to facilities to support those changes as they come up. You can talk to people and let them know what isn't perfect at your facilities, because so much of the time people with disabilities, they have to think 3 steps in advance everywhere they go. And so for you to tell them ahead of time instead of them having to figure it out when they arrive is a really amazing thing that just takes some of the stress away. Okay, so we're gonna have a bit of a discussion. So we've got 2 questions here. So what are key features of pool accessibility for all people with a disability that need to be considered? So we can just have to go through those. And then those other pieces of if your pool doesn't meet every accessibility need, what can you do about it? I know we've kind of talked about a couple things generally, but if there's specifics that you know have either worked in other communities or you've already tried, it's great to hear them.
So I think the idea here is what do you think, if you all live on pool decks, big significant parts of your life. So what are some features that you think do make something accessible? Put underneath that label at your facility or at other facilities that you've seen.
The hoist or a chair to help a person get in and out of the pool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great one.
A ramp to get in and out of the pool.
Most of our doors at the facilities we have are like there's like slide doors, like they just automatic. You don't have to touch anything, at least. And then we have family change rooms as well. There's not with designated accessible change rooms and bathrooms. And in one of our pools, we have like an entire room. It's got like a bed or like I'm not sure what the heck it is because I've never been in there really, but there's lots of access at our main pool. And then one's a university, so they have pretty good access as well. But the university pool has a ramp, and it has the lift. So
Great. Does anyone's pool, I mean, this might just again be something you maybe just haven't noticed. Do you know, does your pool have a lift in the change rooms? So I am in London, and at the Canada Games Aquatic Center, we have an accessible change room, change room that actually, it's the only pool I've ever seen it at. So I'm always asking people, it actually has like a hoist lift in the change room so that someone can actually be lifted, like if they needed to be, from their chair onto the changing, I guess it would be like a counter or a bed, you would call it. And it's the only place I've seen it. Does anyone else have this in their facilities?
I've never seen that in a pool. I've never seen a recreation facility. I don't think I've seen it in real life.
Yeah.
Like I said, the one in Windsor has that bed, but
Mhm.
there might
It
be
does
one.
have the hoist.
It does. I've
Okay.
been there twice,
Yeah,
so
it does.
yeah.
Cool. Cool. That's awesome. I thought it was unique, so I'm glad to see it someplace, other places as well.
I think they have it at Teapask as well. It's not on deck. There's one that's off deck, but I believe they have that in there as well. Just off of in between the two change rooms. It's a private change room.
I think, yes, I think you were right. I think that is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now that I think about it. Awesome. Is there anything else? Any other accessibility features that are kind of unique around a pool or at your pool that you've noticed?
Well, in Perth there we have automatic doors, but I know there's been some issues with how long they stay open. Like,
Mm-hmm.
because you get partway through it and the door is there. So I know whenever I'm on the pool deck, I'm always making sure that because I work at the pool full time as well as coach, making sure that there's people with comfort physio and stuff like that. So I'm always make sure that I'm there to hit the button again to make sure they get down and out. So, and I find we've had that someone come look at it and they don't seem to always be able to change the timing on it. So I don't know if there's a better product, name brand or something out there, or where I'd find the best, to maybe promote that with our, management or whatever. So I'm not sure if you have any ideas on that.
I think I think there is like a typical length of time that the door is supposed to stay open. I'm not sure. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I probably could maybe look into finding that. It's really interesting, that door thing, because I find for myself that sometimes the doors take so long to open or so long to close. Like when you go into an accessible change room and you hit the button on your way in, and then you're sitting in there and you're like, okay, the door could close now. Like I want to get changed. So it's such an interesting thing. But yeah, there's definitely I'm pretty sure that there is supposed to be like the sweet spot time on that. But I will look that up because I'm interested to know that actually. Those are good points. Have people noticed anywhere now, one of the common things now that they're doing is to lock the door, it's actually a separate button. Typically, they're a big red button that you put in the accessible change rooms that you
Markham has
lock.
one. Markham
Yeah.
has Markham Pool has one. Because that's for coaches. That's why I'll be honest. That's where I go to the bathroom at Markham, because there is no family change room, and it's all like I don't want to go in with the kids. I don't want to be in there. That's a whole nother issue. So that's the closest one for coaches to get out, and that door takes forever to close, by the way. And it has that red button. And then for WAC, one thing I did notice that I didn't realize is that we have, like, to get onto the bulkhead, I think we have a little ramp that they pull out. It's because there's a lip and there's a ramp, and then mats. I don't know if we have mats, but I see them all the time at Teapask on the side of the pool, because when some people can't exit from the ends, they exit the side, and mats to make it easier, and then potentially ramps for the podium as well.
Yep.
If someone gets on the podium, we want to be able to make sure that they get up on the podium properly and safely, and then they have the ramps to get on the podium, which I don't know if we have at our facility. So
Yeah, those ramps aren't
One
as
more
common
comment
as
on
you
the
think.
I excuse the terminology, because I think that the signage I'm thinking at our golf course is special needs washroom. So it has a big red button to lock the door. I do find that a confusing thing, because I go in there and I have to really check out the buttons that I'm making sure I lock and open, because a big red button to me looks like the nuclear button that is going to be calling for help. I found that a confusing thing to say. That was, in my opinion, a poor choice to use to lock a door, to push a big red button. But I've seen that in other places. Another thing, I Googled what are key accessible things that for a pool besides the ramp and things that I've already mentioned. I realized that other parts that were I'm sure you're going to get to it, were physical, cognitive, auditory, and visual needs. So, we're quickly going to the physical parts that we see, but if we're talking about being more inclusive, it's not literally just the physical elements that can help or not, it's other. And I thought that was pretty important to mention the cognitive, auditory, visual needs as well.
Absolutely.
And those I can't imagine any anything at our current pool that would be helpful in those areas.
On that note, I'm in Edmonton, and I know one thing that West Edmonton Mall, the water park, has done is they do like a low sensory time on occasion. It's not consistent and not like constant, but like on occasion they'll actually do a low sensory time, which like for a water park with I don't even know how many slides and is absolutely wild to actually have that makes it accessible, right? So all those pieces really tie in.
Well, we share the pool once in a while with the Special Olympics group. And the last time we were in, we were asked and reminded to stay away because our activity in all the things that we're doing physically and noise and whatever is just a distraction. So it was mentioned as no other group. We've shared the pool with other people. Nobody's ever asked us to change how we conduct ourselves. But we were asked and said, like, so it's not a policy thing, it's just a reminder thing and good courtesy to maybe note some of that.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Has anyone noticed any Braille around their facilities? So I have a funny story about Braille. And those big red buttons that we were just all mentioning. One of the athletes that I have worked with is an athlete with visual impairment, and he informed me. I asked him about like, is Braille actually helpful to you because you can't see that the Braille is there? So does that actually help you? And he actually told me that actually it's most helpful in hallways for like door numbers, because then he can kind of feel along the wall and it's in a consistent place on the doors so he can find the right room. And I said, oh, okay, and do you have any interesting stories about this? And he told me that at TPASC, that there is a Braille sign on the wall that says to lock the door, push the red button. That doesn't really help him at all. So
That is funny.
There is what I would consider an accessibility fail, where someone was like, oh, well, we're doing something. So they took there's wording, and they literally took that wording and put it into Braille, and it doesn't help him at all. So sometimes we try to do things without really thinking about how they're going to be utilized. Another piece that is actually an accessibility feature that we don't always think about is that a lot of our pools have, like if I think of TPASC, there is the grate system before you get to the edge of the pool. That's actually an accessibility feature in a way, because if someone has low vision, they can feel that difference with their cane or with their feet before they get actually to the edge of the water. So sometimes some accessibility features are actually just kind of built in to our environments. They're not always necessarily things that are quote unquote special or done after. They can be just kind of naturally occurring pieces.
And I feel like some of those pieces around like vision as well, like I wear glasses, right? So like when I swim, I might wear contacts, but I might not. And so even just like mild color difference towards the edge of the pool helps, right? So it's not just those that you would consider blind or like with a visual impairment, because anyone that wears glasses has a visual impairment. It's just like different ways that society has corrected those things, essentially.
That is a good point. That's also why in pools there's a black line and the T's are black or a dark blue. Again, for that contrast, so that they are easily seen by everyone. But even if you wear, I don't know anyone who does this, but if you swim without goggles, even then you can't see so great. So those contrasting colors are another piece that can be really, really helpful.
Okay, do we want to move on to the next section?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Oh yeah, and then competitions. Dart, I'll let you cover this one.
Yes. So this piece would become more apparent once you were working with an athlete with a disability. But some of these same thinking that we would do in our own home facilities, we actually need to take into consideration when we are planning to travel for competitions. And again, it's not necessarily again that an environment is going to be perfect or we don't go. That's not the point, but it's more about being aware of the environment. And if again you can prepare your athlete for, okay, we're going to this pool. For example, if you were coming to London and you were going to the Canada Games Aquatic Center, you might tell your athlete, okay, well, the pool is actually on the lower level, so you're going to use, there's an elevator at the top of the stairs, and you're going to use that to go down. So again, being just kind of aware, if you can be, with the environment. And Geneva and I were having a chat about this, and this is a piece I'm actually going to take back to Swim Ontario, is about meat packages. Potentially, there should be a section in meat packages that just identify accessibility considerations. You know, and maybe it's as simple as there's power doors, there's a ramp, you have to use an elevator, just simple things so that people are aware of these features before they come to your facility. As well, if you're working with an athlete, you might need to think about things such as where they're going to swim in the pool. For some athletes, it's easier for them if they race in an outside lane. And that might be something that you can talk to meet management about. Or if they start in the pool or on the side, those are things to just kind of keep in consideration. Other pieces that you're going to think about is moving around a pool deck. Now, we've all been around pool decks for extended periods, but we all know there's a very, very big difference between walking around a pool deck with just your team and at a competition when there can be 300 people on the pool deck. So it might be a consideration for where your team is going to sit on the pool deck so that everyone can sit together and no one feels like they are singled out due to how their mobility is around a pool deck. It might be that you need to work with your athlete on their timelines, and maybe they need to leave extra time to get behind the blocks because now they're going to have to navigate through crowds. Or I have been at pools where it's been easier to go out a door, go down the hallway, and come back onto the pool deck to be able to get down to the starting end. So just kind of things to keep in mind. Wanting to just ensure again that refs sometimes need to be aware, particularly if you have an athlete who does not have a easily visually identifiable impairment. You might need to just remind the ref that, oh, this athlete, you know, is a paraswimmer, and they're going to need extra time as well. Not that everyone is necessarily always aware of this, but we actually do have different starting procedures for paraswimmers. So if there is a paraswimmer in a heat, they will clear the lane, the heat before, completely out of the water, because some paraswimmers start in the water or on the side. And then after the heat, they will clear the pool because again, some paraswimmers take longer to get out of the water, and for safety reasons, it's better to give them a little more time. Other considerations when you're booking hotels, if your club, some clubs still do team travel, some clubs still do hotel blocks, taking into consideration, is there accessible rooms? Can you block one of those for your athletes? And then when we talk about actual transportation, different considerations when you think about flying and busing and distances from where the hotel is to the pool. I know some clubs like to stay at hotels that are within walking distance. Is that going to work for all of your athletes? And if not, can we make arrangements for helping that athlete get to the pool or other considerations? So these are just a few things I just wanted to bring to mind, that when we talk about place, it's not just our home program, it's in our home pools and our home facilities, but it is also when we are at other facilities with our athletes. And kind of the message for all of this is really, the more that we can do the thinking, the less it's put on the athlete or the athlete's family, and that mental load that comes with that. Oh, we got notes. We got team dinners. Yes, considerations for restaurants. That is a great point. For sure. If there is out, even if we go to allergies within your program, or there's different dietary needs or noise levels, or can they get in the restaurant? That's a very good point. Thank you. Thank you very much for bringing that one up.
Well, just general team builders as well. If a
Mhm.
team's like, oh, we're gonna go play laser tag, it's a huge difference.
Yes, that's another good point.
Okay, we are gonna move from place to promotion. A lot of people I talk to, a big question is often around promotion, kind of the how to promote and who to promote to, what makes it specific with Parasport, and kind of what that looks like. So with all of your promotional materials, you want to be clear in who you are, what programs you have, and then how inclusive your programs are, and who you are marketing to. Um, if you say for everyone, it's not for everyone. And so being specific on who it is and how they can be involved is really important. And so that whole piece of not saying that you're inclusive if you're not. If you're not inclusive, that's okay. But recognizing how you're not so that you can either make changes to be more inclusive or just to be aware is really important. So we're going to have a bit of a discussion. So the questions we have are, who do you promote to? How do you promote? Where do you promote? And why do you promote? So this is open discussion, so feel free to unmute and we'll get it going.
Can I ask a quick question on this part? I'm just curious because I know that some of our clubs in Ontario are quite large and well known, and they don't do any promotion. So I guess my first question is does your club currently engage in promotion activities? Or do you just leave it up to they'll find our website, or we're so well known in town that we don't need to do that? I'm just curious. Oh, Colleen says no. No promotion.
So I know for us, we don't do any promotion. And I think that's why I'm taking this course. One of the reasons, because I would like to. But I also go back to that last point of I don't want to say it's for everyone without, making it for everyone. And I want to make sure that it is a place for everybody. But I don't think it is right now. So that's part of it. And then making sure that one of the things, again, apologies, I didn't do the homework, but looking at one of the questions about one of the things that I think is a value for me is as a coach learning through the years that if I say I'm going to do something, I have to follow through on it. And if we say we're going to do something on the website, we have to follow through on it. And we're not at a point where we're doing that. So that's where I want to get to.
Great. Being aware of where you're at is the first step. So that's great that you have that awareness about your programs and have a desire to improve and move forward. All right. So Anne says we do not, but just social media. And Barb says no promotion needed for our programs. And it's amazing and it's awesome in a way that swimming is such a foundational sport in our country that we do have programs that don't have to promote because they're full. They have waiting lists. People know about them. They want to come. They're so established in their towns, and that's really great. That's a great thing. When it comes to wanting to bring in a different demographic into your programming, that's when the promotion of that piece becomes really important. And for the first question in there, who do you promote to? So I'll just ask you, if you were to do some promotion, you were looking to do some promotion to say, hey, we are open to working with individuals with disabilities. We want to grow that portion of our club. Who do you think you would promote to?
Well, I think, like Mike was saying, you got to find out what are you capable of doing first. You don't want to just, like you're saying, say we're inclusive. Yes, we'll take anybody. And then you decide you don't have the coaches, you don't have the space, you don't have the accessibility. So I think that's my biggest question too, is like, I want to promote it. I want to have para swimming, but I also am scared to, say that and then we don't really do a good job of it. You want to make sure that you're not upsetting people when you open that up. So I think the first person, before you can promote to someone, you have to decide who can you promote to. Does that sound reasonable, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but kind of Darda was saying, okay, but assume that you were set up for it. Like, how would you, if that's the exercise, Darda, to sort of say, okay, like assume you've decided that, and are you picking a particular cohort, but in a general sense, like, is that what you're asking, Darda? Like who?
Yeah. So
Okay.
if you were to say we are set, we are
Fine.
going to, we feel comfortable. We're going to offer a program to we're going to offer a program to children with visual impairments. We have a coach who has a sibling or something, let's just say. So we feel we're going to start and we are going to say that we are open to working with swimmers with visual impairments. So you've decided that's your target group. This is what you're going to do. So who would you promote to? Who would you promote to? Let's start with that.
I'd find out the agencies that have those individuals. Like I would think that being ignorant in that, I would start with a Google search of the demographic we've just described, the agencies that service those individuals.
Yeah, that's definitely an idea for sure. So it's a little, so the one part I'm going to put on this is that's the answer I get the most from people is, well, I would find where this demographic is and I would go to them, which is not a bad idea. But I did an entire dissertation on how to on the development of paraswimmers. And one of the pieces that I looked at was how did they find out about swimming? How did they find out about that? And the majority of them found out about programs through word of mouth. And so what happens is we tend to focus our promotion on this one target group, but we miss this whole opportunity to make sure that everyone in our community is aware of what we're doing. So if you are going to start a program, and I encourage you, if you are going to start something, first of all, applaud you. Second of all, let me know. But third of all, you can start small. You can start very, very niche in what you feel that you can handle. You can also start your program with 2 kids. If you think 2 is what we can, like, no one is expecting you that you are going to be everything, everyone first off. So I just want to put everyone's mind at ease on that. And then the second point is, if you are going to start things, every single member of your club should know about that. Every athlete, every parent, every board member, every volunteer, because that's how it's actually going to spread in the community. It's going to be this thing where, one of your swim parents is at work and their buddy at work happens to have a child that has a disability, and they're going to say, oh, hey, yeah, our club, they just started a program. Maybe your kid's interested. That's actually how most people learn about programming. The truth of the matter is that for a lot of families that have children with disabilities, sport is not at the top of their priority list or their to-do list, and so they're not actively looking for a program. But if somebody brings it to them and says, "Hey, this could be for you," it says that it's for kids that have a visual impairment. Your child has a visual impairment. You should go check it out. So a little bit of a trick question. Yes, you want to target, but also want to make sure that everyone, as broad as you can spread it, is aware of your programs. And that's actually where you're going to have your biggest impact. So can I just say one more thing before we move on off this one? I just want to say, why do you promote? You also need to have, I know you're also, everyone has said, no one said that they have a specific promotion plan or whatever. If you are targeting a new demographic, you are going to want to have some sort of promotion plan, whether again, it's a meeting with your membership to just spread it to them, or if you are going to reach out to specific groups and areas. But the promotion piece does have to happen again more than it does for the rest of your population that you are targeting. Especially because you need people to be able to feel like they can see themselves in your environment. It's representation is huge. And, you know, someone with a disability, if they're looking at a club and they don't see on the website, they don't see anything that looks like it applies to them. There's no images of someone who looks anything close to the way that they do or functions differently like they do. They're not going to think that that's for them. So you would have to make an effort to promote the idea out that your club is open and willing to work with people with disabilities. I'm not saying you have to spend a ton of money. I all know clubs are strapped, but having a plan in how you're going to do that is really important.
Okay. So following up on that promotion piece, kind of is that lead into partnerships and who you can start to reach out to if you are doing that direct communication, in addition to all of your communication. So thinking about different groups that you can kind of partner with and actually build a network of people to be engaged with. So thinking about disability sport organizations and just the disability sport community generally, health and rehabilitation centers, parents and support workers, going through schools are all really good options. And just kind of thinking about why partnerships have value. So for granting opportunities, a lot of grants, if you're partnering with people, they like it. They're giving you more money. Sometimes it's just sharing resources, sharing expertise, and just really having a symbiotic relationship. Because an organization might have the people, but you have the coaches. And so actually figuring out how that works, really good. So I've kind of touched on it a bit, but what can you do with partnerships that you can't do on your own? And so this might be specifically within your club.
Could you help get funding for things you might need to help have your place be accessible? Or, yeah, like funding or finding out where to get things from, maybe?
Yeah, for sure.
Other point about partnerships that I think could be really helpful, especially for those of you that are saying like, we want to do something, but we don't know how, and we're not really sure if we're ready. Making partners with different community groups that are already working with the population that you want to start offering a program from can be really, really helpful. If you connect with another para sport or an accessible sport in the area, they'll have coaches that are working with those athletes that might be able to give you some hints and tips on what works for them, how they started their program, all of those types of things. Just because it's not directly swimming doesn't mean that there's a lot of value there. You know, you might even be able to make a partnership where maybe one of their coaches comes and attends a practice and maybe points out some things that works for them in their environment that might work for you in your pool environment. If you connect with a rehabilitation center, a children's rehabilitation center, you know, they have recreation therapists who can help with promotion to their client group, but you know, they also have expertise, or they can get a physiotherapist or an occupational therapist involved who, you know, if you start a program and you're feeling stuck and you're not really, you know, this technique just doesn't seem to be working for this athlete, contacting a physiotherapist could be a place where they could come in and maybe give a different view on what's working or not working for an athlete. You can also get ideas through things like the CNIB is another place where you can get some ideas on how do we make our pool more accessible, or what kind of features would be helpful to set up a program for people with a visual impairment. I know that we feel that as coaches, there is this mentality that we are the experts and we are going to teach these kids how to swim. When we work with children or anyone with disabilities, we aren't the experts in anything. We just have to know what questions to ask and then where to kind of find those answers. And so making partnerships in the community can be a way in which to find those answers to those questions.
Well, and another kind of added piece to that is if you are trying to run a program, if you partner with another organization, if it's a well-known organization within the disability community, it adds legitimacy to your program. Because your club, your program might not be trusted within the disability community, but as soon as you have that backing and that relationship, people will start to recognize, like, okay, this is a safe place to be, and they're putting an effort in those pieces.
What's the best way to find these partnerships? Just Google, or is there actually like a list anywhere that we could access?
So in Ontario, there is Parasport Ontario, which is a kind of umbrella organization that a big part of what they do is connect people with disabilities to different program groups or different programs to each other and to participants. So that's one really good resource we have. There is the Children's Treatment Center, what is it called? Network in Ontario that is also really beneficial. There is, they do a lot of the connecting as well. And there's something else, but it's not coming to the front of my mind at the moment. But when I think of it, I can also send out a few resources for you as well.
That would be fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any more comments or questions about partnerships before we keep moving? Okay, so we will move on to price. So with all of our programs, there's prices involved and cost, from pool space to just anything with programs are going to cost money. But cost is a huge barrier for many people experiencing disability. There's a lot of hidden costs of having a disability that aren't really necessarily known. And so figuring out how to kind of support that in different ways. So within a club, that might be looking at like variable fee structures, and looking at different methods, and even grants can help with that a lot of the time. And Darda is going to talk about actually these costs.
Yeah, so I mean, we throw around these things about how disability costs money. But again, if you're not living it, you're not really aware of it. So living with a disability does come with higher increased costs, and things that are seen and unseen. So, you know, making something accessible within your home, putting in a ramp, even building your little ramp out the front of a house. If you do it to AODA code specifications, those things are expensive. I can tell you mine is not AODA approved. Don't tell anyone, but it works for me. And things like an accessible vehicle. Those are above and beyond the cost of a regular vehicle. If, as soon as you put a lift in something, you're looking at an extra $20,000. Medical costs, such as just traveling to all the medical appointments some people might have. They also have paying for mobility aids. So for those who don't know, I guess I just kind of assumed, I am an above knee amputee. Can't really see it because I'm on a screen. But I use a prosthetic, and I also use a wheelchair part-time. The last prosthesis that I purchased was $56,000. And it will last me for 5 years. So these are things that people don't recognize the cost of until you need it. So there's things like that. Wheelchairs. It's really funny. I have friends who are wheelchair users, and they will complain to me about the cost of their wheelchairs, which can be $3,000 to $6,000. But when you're an adult, they last for 10 years. And then I look at them and go, well, at least you didn't buy a prosthetic. So there are costs that we don't necessarily always recognize. Also, for some individuals, attending programs on their own isn't something that's possible for them. So then they have the cost of not only their participation, but the participation of their aid to assist their participation. Some programs do provide subsidies for those types of things, but some do not. Transportation can be tricky, not only if you have an accessible vehicle, but also not only is there the cost of public transportation if you want to take that, but if you want to take something such as paratransit or accessible transit, there is the time cost factor. In London, for example, if you want to use paratransit, you have to book your ride 4 days in advance. And you have to get on the call at 7 a.m. if you have a certain time that you need to go 4 days later. So those are things that day to day most people don't think about. And then we have things like sports costs. So, in our sport, adapted and specialized equipment, there isn't a ton. I would say in general, swimming, this is one place that swimming saves money. But even a swimsuit. So when I was racing, we're going back a little bit. I wore the leg suits. And I had to go get those tailored. Fortunately for me, my mom was a tailor, and she could do it at home. But if you're not, there's an added cost to that as well. Traveling, having to upgrade seating because you don't fit in a seat, or you need more space if you have a service dog, those types of things. So when we talk about looking for ways to, if you can, minimize pricing at all, or if you can find grants, that's great. But just having an understanding that there are additional costs that people with disabilities have that our other community members don't necessarily have in their lives. And if there is a way that we can make adjustments, that's just one extra way that we can make our programming potentially just a little bit more attractive or open to more individuals.
Well, and even if the cost of a program can't change, allowing for payment plans. So not having all of the cost up front makes a big difference too. Okay. And then we're on to our last one for this session. Darda, do you want to talk about our first point?
Yes, I do. So we have this image in sport in Canada that all athletes want to go to the Paralympics. They're all going to be Paralympians. Anyone can be a Paralympian. The truth of that is anyone can be a Paralympian in the same way that anyone, in quotations, can be an Olympian. We all know that majority of our athletes are not going to be Olympians, and the same falls for Paralympians. And not only that, but not all of them want to be. So, for some people, they simply want to engage because it's social, because it's fun, because it's fit and it's healthy for them. Um, I just like to emphasize this point because we just really have a push, I find, towards elite sport all the time for people with disabilities, and we tend to push them through pathways, or they tend to be pushed through pathways quite quickly. So, roughly we have the 10-year rule when it comes to our Olympic stream athletes. Research tells us in Canada that our Paralympic stream athletes can be competing at the national level on average, within 5 to 6 years. So it is quite a bit shorter. Now, the one issue with that is that, can we truly prepare them for that environment that much quicker? That's a question that researchers are looking at, coaches deal with. I would say that what ends up happening for a lot of our athletes is they get pushed to the national level or the international level very, very quickly. And a lot of their development actually continues, but now it's continuing in a more high stress environment. And there are pros and there are cons to that. So one of the things I've heard coaches say is, unfortunately, I've heard high performance coaches say to new coaches working with paraswimmers is, well, it's a fast track to elite coaching. So, this is why you should do it. Please do not coach athletes with disabilities because you want to get to a higher level as a coach. It can be a bonus on the side. That's great, but please don't let that ever be your main motivation. That's not really a healthy mentality, in my opinion. And I think that it does a disservice to our athletes. I think we start looking at what we can gain from it as opposed to what we can give to our athletes and what's best for our athletes. So there's I'll get off my soapbox now. Go ahead, Geneva.
No, that's great. So kind of with that, thinking about those different interest levels, whether someone wants to swim because it makes them feel good, or they want to develop skills, or they do want to compete, but not at the Paralympics, but just understanding those different skill levels on a beginning basis, but then also like the actual interest. So like within a program, being able to make sure that you have different practices, or at least practices that can cater enough to athletes to meet those needs. So not pushing your athlete that just wants to swim to be competing every weekend, because it's just going to push them out of the sport. And those pieces. So yeah, just having lots of different options available. And that can be within the same program, in multiple programs. It really depends on what your capacity is.
Sorry, that on that last slide, Genevieve, you had the challenge review the long-term development model.
Mm-hmm.
Is a long-term development model? I can't read the font because I have my screen condensed because other things going on, or I'm taking my notes on a different screen. The long-term development model is a generic statement, right? Generic goals and everything. There's not a long-term development model that relates to Paralympic athletes.
Not specifically, no.
No, because you said, but go to that, and is that what it says? It said identify. Sorry, I should enlarge my screen. Identify how and when athletes with disabilities may enter and leave your sport on the same grounds.
Dart, I think you know more than I do about this.
Yes, this was a big part of my dissertation. So we'll speak to this briefly, or try to keep it brief. So you are correct that the long-term development model is very generic. They have in recent renditions tried to provide pieces that would relate to athletes with disabilities a little bit more. So for example, instead of first awareness kind of just being at the bottom, just being like young kids and having an age piece to it, that is now, they've moved it to along the side, kind of to identify that it can happen at any stage, at any age, that awareness and first contact pieces. They're recognizing, particularly for people with disabilities, that age doesn't really work. people with disabilities come into sport at a much broader age range than their non-disabled counterparts. And so we need programming that kind of recognizes that. So there are some features that they have put in to try and make it applicable, but they still, in my opinion, and if you'd like to read my dissertation, there's a whole chapter on this, not that you have to, but that talks about how it doesn't actually really meet the needs because there's so many nuances that are unique to the athlete with a disability experience that are not taken into consideration in the model. That all being said, it is what we use in sport. And I think the reason why it gets brought up here is that we know that some coaches are quite familiar with it. So we want it to be a place for coaches to start from and to use the language from it so that it can connect in with what you are doing and how you're working with your non-disabled athletes. So that's why it's a piece to start from here. There is also the No Accidental Champions document that is out there. And that document is dated now. It needs to be updated. I will say that. And it kind of took the long-term development model and tried to kind of see how it could connect to athletes with a disability. Again, it's dated. I think it could be updated and it could be a lot more effective. If you want to learn more, I'm happy to have a conversation about that.
No, I love this. I love that because I have my own beef, my own rant, and I'll get off my soapbox in 1 second. Is there any other coaches online? I forget that some were doing mostly age group, but there may have been some on the call. They're doing masters, but in the long-term development plan, it basically has so much information all the way through in ages and what you should be doing. And it's such a great template. And then it says, and then after an adult, go. And it basically lumps adults together from the ages of 18 to 99, on cognitive ability, physical ability, and what they're able to do mentally. So I have my own little beef. I'll stop. But if there are any other masters coaches there, they may have run into this, that the templates are great if they're great.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would just say, I think I've said it a few times. The one issue I have with any of these guides is they get written once and then maybe they get reviewed once every 10 years and they aren't keeping up with what sport is looking like and what our athletes are looking like at those different stages. But that is a really good point that you are correct. And I think the same kind of idea applies when we take it for athletes with disabilities, is they kind of just lump everyone together and there's so much nuance and just say, yep, this is your experience. And we really can't do that. We can't do that with any athlete, but especially athletes with disabilities. If you've coached one athlete with a disability, you've coached one athlete with a disability. You can't really take a ton. You can take the questions that you asked and use those elsewhere. So yes, those guides and those models are very general and a place to jump off from and to give some beginning suggestions from. But past that, you do need to use your own judgment and get to know your own athlete to know. Use with care. Yes, I like that. Use with care. Absolutely. That is a good way to put it.
With everything that's been talked about with kind of like that fast track idea with parasport, I find actually looking at the model, that visual really highlights that fast track. Because when you look at it linearly, you just skip all the steps until you get to one place. And so I've known athletes that they might go through 3 steps in a week and then they're already at that high performance stage within a year. And so just like those timelines don't work. And so like recognize they don't work, but just the visual of it I find quite interesting in addition to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Geneva, when you're talking about that. And the pathway part also relates to when we talk about where in our programming we place athletes with disabilities. And there's a lot of debate on this. There are some people who say, well, they should be placed with their similar aged counterparts. And some people say, well, no, they should be placed with their developmental physical developmental counterparts. So for example, they're I have a 12-year-old, but they're this, or they have a 12-year-old, but they are the speed of some of our 8-year-olds. So which group do I place them in? And that can be a big debate that kind of goes with this pathway idea of where do you place them. Personally, I think it's a bit of a both. It's a mixture of both. But that's just my personal opinion. And again, I think you have to work with your athletes to identify that for them and where they want to be and where they want to move through the programming and the pathways that you have available within your programming.
Okay, so we're going to go into our last discussion piece around what do people get out of sport if they aren't focused on going to that highest level of competition, and what goals do they have?
I think it's for anybody's sport. It's just general, general health, right? Just being stronger physically, mentally being stronger. You can push your limits. You can push past boundaries. There's so many things. So, but specifically the physical strength, right? It might, in a lot of swimming specifically might be an amazing avenue for a para athlete because impact is taken out of it for some people. So just I think the general strength and just fitness and all the positive brain chemicals that are released with doing it too.
I know for myself, just when I can get in the mode of swimming or teaching an exercise class or whatever, that I don't think of anything else but that activity. And so I think that helps relieve stress. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, Darda and Geneva, but if you're a para athlete, you might not think of yourself as a para athlete when you're doing your activity. You're just an athlete.
Absolutely. That's a good point. To go along with what Mike was saying about, like the physical strength piece, you know, sports are actually a really great therapy for some people. The level of muscle mass that they can produce, their mobility, all those things that are great in the pool also translate into day-to-day life. Maintaining strength in so you can stand if you have an impairment that impacts your legs, or strengthens your core, all those different things that then translate outside of the pool and just help your life, help you function in life a little bit smoother or a little bit stronger. In the chat, we have Anne said empowerment, which I love that word. And Nancy said being part of a team. Those are both awesome points that are very
I think you probably get good social skills and time management too, because you have so much practice going on, especially when you're younger. Like it just sets you up for success too.
Great point.
And then sometimes a lot, like some kids might be a para athlete, like like we have kids that swim, but then maybe their main sport is another sport, and so like swimming might enhance their other sport where they're a little bit better at it, or like vice versa. So a lot of the times, like maybe they're not working towards the Paralympics, but they're doing a sport just to help another sport. which helps. Like I mean, the that kid that I coached, like she used to really care about swimming a lot. And that was like her main thing, but like now she's a lot more focused on CrossFit, but like the swimming helps the CrossFit. So even just things like that, like considering like, you know, if you're coaching them in swimming, it might not be their main focus, but it's still like there to help them along the way with other sports that they maybe are more focused on too.
Yeah, those multi-sport athletes are really, yeah, like you don't want kids to specialize too young, and so actually encouraging building all those different skills and getting all those different experiences. Okay. If we have no more comments for that one, we can move into our wrap up.
Oh, sorry. Can I just point out one?
Mhm.
Sports are fun. That's actually what sports are supposed to be. That's why I think we all probably started. Being in the water is fun. Ultimately brings us joy. You know, you can be the worst, most uncoordinated swimmer, but being in the water can just be such a freeing movement and just bring so much joy to your life, which we all need more of all the time. So you don't always get that at the Paralympics, but that's another story.
Okay. So just a note on the take-home assignment. Darda will send out an email tomorrow with the assignment as well as these slides. Then just put the date that we've asked it to be submitted by. So that's Sunday, November 10th, and there'll be a Google form as well. Sent out tomorrow. Are there any questions around the take-home assignments, either this one that's coming up or the past one?
Can you still hand in the last week's assignment?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry, I was late getting into the meeting because I had practice was to 6:45 and we had a swimmer get hurt. So I was late getting home. So I apologize for being late to the meeting, and you probably said all that in the beginning.
Oh, that is okay. Glad you made it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap up a bit early tonight. So just kind of as our final wrap up, in the chat, or if you do want to speak up, you're also free to. We'll just have you answer one of these questions. So either tell us the most valuable part of the session, or one word to describe how you're feeling right now.
While people are thinking or putting things in the chat, I'm just putting some links into the chat, some resources. I'll also send this out in an email, but if some people are just wanting to click and go there, I will put that in there as well. And thank you to Nancy for the No Accidental Champions link. That was helpful. Oh, Colleen's feeling drained. It's never good when an athlete gets hurt, so we all feel for you. Thank you for still coming.
I mean, for me, I'm excited, but I slightly overwhelmed in the idea of trying to think of how to eliminate barriers, or not physical barriers, but just the barriers and the constraints of one, cost, and two, space. I think that's why we went away from a designated para group in our club, was because our club grew to a point at which it wasn't viable to have one coach coaching three athletes in two lanes. And we had to sort of push all the para athletes, if they still wanted to swim in the regular group structure. So the barrier of that, and then if we do now start a para program, finding that right ratio of coach to swimmer and being able to make it affordable without having them charging them for that ratio. So that would be our challenge. And that's, I'm sure there's many more, but the facility, great, we have the ability to do it. Or can we do it as a club? Which not daunting, but I don't know. It's just one of those challenges that I'd like to try and be able to figure out. So
I agree. I feel the same way that Mike's feeling. And that is just pretty basically due to lack of pool space and just lack of pools and all of those good things that we deal with everybody, not just a specific group. So trying to, yeah, and the lack of coaches to as well is overwhelming.
Yeah, it's definitely a daunting when we start out down this journey, but our hope in this is that to give you some things to think about and to start that process, and to reach out to each other, reach out to Swim Ontario, reaching to those. We do have coaches and clubs that are doing things. We've had some programs just start in the last couple of years, so. That is exciting, and that's gonna be a place where we can connect and learn from other people, best practices, things like that. Please know you are not alone in any of these struggles, but the fact that you are here, the fact that you are starting this process and you're even spending time thinking about this is huge, and that's a great first step. Everything takes time. There's never enough time, money, pool space. Those are the three things we don't have enough of ever. But working together, we can think of solutions and come up with plans. So I just really want to thank you for even considering it and taking baby steps. It's a baby step. That's right. So yes. So thank you all very much for coming. And I will send out an email with the take-home assignment. I will also send out some of these links and potentially a few more for you. If you have any questions, by all means, please reach out to either myself or Geneva, and we can help with that at that point. And again, really, the take-home assignments are for you. We hope that they're helpful to you. They are available even after. If you want to keep working on those or to even just take them to think about, they are there for you for that. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Geneva, was there any last remarks that you wanted to make?
No, I think that's great.
Awesome.
Thank you both. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Darda. Thank you, Geneva.
Thank you.
We'll see
Thanks
you
for
in a couple
coming.
weeks. Okay.
Excellent.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Isabella. Colleen, we are here to help. And I'm sure tonight you're feeling it a bit. So hopefully you can go take some deep breaths and things will be better tomorrow.
Last weekend or last meeting, I was in a migraine. I don't even remember you saying anything about it having to be in on the Sunday. I get halfway through it and think I've got an hour and a half today before I got to go to practice. I'll get it all done. I'm such a good girl. And I go to get in it. I can't get in it. I can't figure out why I can't get in it. And then I finally scroll to the bottom and I see that it was due 2 days ago, and I'm like, are you kidding me? So, geez, and then I have 3.5 hours of practice to go to.
Well, we appreciate the effort, and ultimately the take-home assignments are resources for you. So I hope that you still get something out of it for going through the process. And if there's anything that we can do to support, please just let us know.
Oh, so we don't have to do them?
Well, you have to do them for the PD points to get all three. So I encourage you to do them moving forward, but yeah.
I'll try my darndest.
Excellent.
It's unfortunately with Chatham, I'm sure you're well aware that we're not of a size where we could even consider having a para program per se, or having dedicated para lanes. I've had a below the knee amputee at one point that I've had to work and accommodate around. But to me, that's all. Like, I'm a retired registered nurse. I'm used to having to snap, get everything going, figure out where I can put things to make things work the best and flow the best, and not hold anything up. And right now I have a para swimmer who has an intellectual disability, and I work with him either depending on his mood, he's in one group or another group. If fast Luke, slow Luke. Right. And
Yep.
we work with him how we have to, and I pretty much look at all of my groups as I have to deal with them, because there's usually 2 levels of development within every group that I have, just because of the structure of our practices. The amount of time and lane space that I actually get is like a big jigsaw puzzle. I get blocks of time. I don't get, I have an hour here and then an hour that night and then an hour and an hour and an hour. I get here. You have 4 hours on Monday. You have 3.5 hours on Tuesday. You have 4 hours on Friday. Figure out what you're going to do with it.
Right.
So, this is all just really interesting. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing as much as I can to help Luke and any prospective para swimmer that might come in the future. I would love to get the PD points, but I'm going to have to see how much time I have to
That's fair.
think about inclusion statements and all of that, because that's like blowing my mind.
But you're thinking about it, and that's what we really want. We really just want to start those thought processes. So we're achieving what we're hoping for. So thank you
Well,
for
that's
that.
good. Well, I am thinking about it, so I've earned my points.
Excellent.
That's my pitch.
I appreciate it.
All right. It's my birthday, so I'm going to get off the air.
Oh my
and
goodness,
go
you
have...
came on your birthday? I feel
Yes.
honored. Happy birthday.
Right. I deserve those points.
Okay, all right. Maybe because it's your birthday, we'll give you the points.
All right.
Okay.
Well, my husband just brought home some lovely beef and tofu, and I have a big bouquet of flowers here on the table. I'm going to give him a big kiss and hug, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
That sounds great.
Okay. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.